Welcome back to Booster Therapy, your cure for that pack cracking addiction. We have a new box, another box, not a typical box, but an Ultra Pro Satin Tower to open for another episode of Commanding Presence, and we know that this is going to be a gruel because of how we label these decks. So today's commander is Phylath, World Sculptor. Then we're going to talk all about lands and the fun of Phylath. So for 4 mana, a red and a green, you get a 5/5. When it enters the battlefield, create a 0/1 green plant creature token for each basic land you control. And then when you hit landfall, you can put 4 1/1 counters on target plant you control. So the whole idea here is to make beefy plants, but also just to play off of, well, landfall, because that's a big part of this deck, and there's a lot of cards, a lot of good cards out there that play well off of it. First part we're going to start with is Ramp, and Ramp is going to be awfully thick because it doubles as spells that create creatures in this one, so we're going for more than the typical 10. First one, though, as always, is Soul Ring. Arcane Signet, because those two together just work real well. Turn 1 Soul Ring into Arcane Signet is real satisfying. Farseek, 2 mana ramp, just a solid search for, in this case, a mountain is how we're going to use it. Sarkura, Tribe Elder, sacrifice to get a basic land. We're going to be focused largely just on basic lands here because that's how Phylath works. Rampant Growth, basic land, 2 mana ramp. Harrow, we can sack a land to get 2 basic lands into play. They don't have to even come into play tap, which is nice, and it's an instant. Kodama's Reach, 2 basic lands. Cultivate, same as Kodama's Reach, just not in Arcane for its sorcery type. Harvest Season, it's easy for us to get a handful of creatures tapped, and ultimately if we have 3 or more, this is always beneficial. Springbloom Druid, the nice thing about this thing is we can blink it and get extra value out of it as well, and we have one way of doing that in this deck. Roiling Regrowth, it's like a nerfed Harrow, but pretty good overall, instant speed. The only downside is they come into play tapped. Wood Elves, similar to Springbloom Druid, it's just nice that we can flicker this, but it gets us a forest card. The Vastwood Surge, it's a big explosive vegetation with the upside of we can kick it and put 2 1/1 counters on all of our creatures. Skyshroud Claim gets us 2 forests into play untapped. Pier's Whim, I love this one. It searches for any land, puts it into play tapped, and we can make our opponents sacrifice artifacts and enchantments. Solemn Simulacrum, another one that can blink and get us basic lands. Migration Path, the upside here is that if we don't want to use it for lands for some reason, we can just cycle it to draw a card. And of course, Scape Shift. We can wipe all of our lands out, have all new lands enter in, and hit that many landfall triggers. Next, let's talk about the landfall, because that is super important. It is how we pull ahead and win with this deck. The first one is Lotus Cobra, just to get that extra mana and go big fast. Phylath is a 6 mana commander, so it's pretty expensive, so we want to get there as quick as we can. Rampaging Baloths, I love this thing. Used to be a mythic. It was so exciting when it first came out, but a 6/6 trample for 6 that creates 4/4 beasts every time we landfall, and a lot of times we're doing that 2 or 3 times a turn, is amazing. Tireless Tracker, another one that gives us some of that card advantage, but whenever a land enters, we get a clue token. We can sack our clues to draw cards, and they also pump up Tireless Tracker. The Scoot Swarm, I love this one. We'll quickly have 6 lands, so often this is making copies of itself, and those copies making copies of themselves, just very powerful. Morog, Fury of Okum, I love this one too. Again, getting those extra combat steps and getting to swing multiple times, that's how we win. We win by beating in and pounding the opponent, so we need extra combat. Nesting Dragon, 5/4 for 5 with landfall that creates dragon eggs. What I like about this one is it helps us with a little bit of that resiliency to board wipe. So if we have a bunch of eggs on the board, plus a bunch of beasts and Scoot Swarms or whatever it is, eventually somebody's going to have the Wrath of God. And when they do that, we get to replace it with a bunch of 2/2 fire-breathing dragons. And of course the Avenger of Zendikar, the big brother of Phylath, the one that really enters with that clean plant buildup, but also Phylath and Avenger both making plants, both of them adding counters to plants. Next, we're going to talk about some of the cards that generate that land advantage. So they let us play more than one, they let us go out of the graveyard, just a few different ways to continue playing lands after Phylath is resolved. So Elvish Reclaimer is a great one. Sack a land to play a land, again just getting that extra value of playing more lands in a turn. Exploration, getting to play an additional land on each of our turns. Renin 6 is we are using our fetch lands, we can put them right back into our hand from our graveyard. That's the huge benefit here. Upside is we might get to hit Retrace on our instants and sorceries. The Ancient Green Warden, it is everything you want in a Lands Matters deck all into one card. So we can play lands from our graveyard. If a land would trigger, so any of our landfalls or investigate triggers, it does it twice. Crucible of Worlds, getting to play lands from our graveyards. It's a staple of almost all Lands Matter decks because you're going to try to play every fetch land you can possibly play. Mina and Den, getting to play an extra land each turn, and we can return lands just to get that extra value of playing it again and giving something trample if we need to. The Living Twister, discard a land, 2 damage to any target, which I love, especially since we can play lands from the graveyard. But also we can return a tapped land to our owner's hand and get that extra value of playing it again. Azusa, Lost But Seeking, getting to play 2 additional lands on each of our turns is even better than Explorations 1. Oracle of Moldiah, getting to play lands from the top of our library and getting to play an additional one each turn is great. Raminap Excavator, just in case somebody breaks our poor Crucible of Worlds, we can Raminap and play them from our graveyard as well. So just a few ways to get that extra land value in the deck. Next, we're going to talk about our card advantage with this one, how we're drawing cards and getting to the things we need outside of thinning our deck with all of the ramp. First one is Guardian Project. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield, we can draw a card. Again, we have one blink effect in this deck that also gives us that extra value. When we blink Phylath and it re-enters again, we'll draw more cards. Eternal Witness, getting anything back from the graveyard. This one's just good because people are going to kill our Crucible of Worlds and some of our engines that we're running on, and we're going to need a way to get it back. Defense of the Heart, I love this one. As long as somebody has a few creatures, we're going to get 2 of our perfect creatures. So Avenger from Zendikar, Craterhoof Behemoth, any of those big things we need to win. Valakut Exploration, this one's landfall and draw a card basically for us. It's the chaotic draw where we've got to play it within a turn, but it's still very valuable. Horn of Greed, this one's a friendship card. Whenever anyone plays a land, we get to draw a card. Orin Frostfang, I love this one. So one, it gives all of our attacking creatures death touch, so people are less likely to just chump block or try to take down our little guys. But also when they do damage, we get to draw a card. And Return of the Wild Speaker. So we're gonna have some big creatures, we can get that card draw, but it's also an instant speed overrun without the trample, which is awesome. Next, we're going to talk about just a few ways that we protect our commander. The first one is, of course, Lightning Greaves, and this really isn't just for Phylath. It could go for any of our creatures, really. Just getting that haste ability, but more importantly, putting Shroud on our most valuable target. Heroic Intervention, so we can survive some of those board wipes. When they swing it in, we play this. Everything's hexproof, everything's indestructible. We hopefully survive another day to fight. And then, of course, Darksteel Plate. Anything we want can be indestructible. It's just a very powerful card for Phylath or Avenger of Zendikar or whoever we want to keep running. Next, we'll talk about our removal spells. We got a handful of removal for the deck. The first one being Rolling Earthquake. It's not the Royal. And it deals X damage to each creature without horsemanship in each player, so just a fun board wipe to just burn down the world a little bit and deal that extra damage to all the players. Crowsand Grip, it's that split second, destroy an artifact or enchantment, so if somebody's trying to combo off and they have a combo piece, we can break it right away. Beast Within, just a great destroy any permanent in green. Love this card. Devastation, this one is horrifying and I love it in every way. Destroys all creatures and all lands. We play lands from our graveyard, we're not worried about them dying, and we have a lot of lands in this deck. This thing is awesome, and it is just painful to see everyone else know that they can't rebuild like we can. And of course, Blasphemous Act. It's just a great board wipe spell in red. Next, we're going to talk just about a handful of what we have for utility and finishers in this deck. The first one is Terror of the Peaks. You know, this one doesn't do much for the 0/1 plants, but we do have a lot of other tokens and creatures entering. Terror of the Peaks, just a strong 5/4 for 5 that helps us whittle down our opponents or any other target that we see of value. Purphoros, God of the Forge. This thing is huge with tokens. We're generating massive amounts of tokens. This is doing 2 damage to each opponent whenever any of them enters the battlefield. Impact Tremors, it's like Purphoros, but the light version. We're just doubling down on getting more of that damage out there. Boundless Realms, it's kind of a ramp spell, but it's an expensive ramp. It's just one way to hit a massive amount of landfall triggers, similar to Scapeshift. Nissa, Voice of Zendikar, we have a bunch of plants out there, so this helps us make more plants, or we can add 1/1 counters across the board to all of our creatures. Blood Moon, we're playing almost exclusively basic lands with the exception of our fetches, and Blood Moon is a really good answer for those greedy mana bases and slow down the pace of our opponents. Branching Evolution, we're adding 1/1 counters all the time, whether it's through Sacrificing Clues, or from Phylath, or Avenger of Zendikar, or Nissa. This thing just doubles the amount of counters we're adding. Doubling Season doubles the counters, doubles the tokens. It just helps us double across the board and get that extra damage out there with Purphoros. Conjurer's Closet, this is a great way to blink. So we can blink Phylath and make more and more and more plants every turn, but there's a ton of other creatures we do this with. Avenger of Zendikar is another one that has an ETB. We have our Wood Elves and our Harrow Druid. I can't remember the name, but we have a lot of different ways to ETB to get lands, to get more creatures, and Conjurer's Closet just doubles down on that, where we get to do it every turn. Hammer of Purphoros, we need haste. Haste is important for a deck like this. If we let people have too many opportunities to answer, we're going to lose the game. Beast Master's Ascension. When you have a board full of 0/1s that you're not getting counters on, all you have to do is swing with 7 of them, and they all become 5/6s. And then, of course, Craterhoof Behemoth, the super finisher of any one of your amazing creature-based decks. You need to have a Craterhoof Behemoth. And that is Phylath World Sculptor, a quick pass through on the lands. Again, mostly just basic lands here. We have a couple exceptions, a lot of the different fetch lands and things like Blighted Woodland, where it gets us more lands. So just trying to fetch out as best as we can to get those extra value on the landfall triggers, and that's Phylath. This deck is a ton of fun, shockingly powerful. I have won more than once with this one, and I've only played it a handful of times, so hopefully you enjoyed it. If you want a link to the full deck list, it's in the description below. It actually links you right out to TCG Player, so if you want to purchase this deck, it's through our affiliate link. It really does help us out. We really appreciate it. And until next time, this is Booster Therapy. You all have a wonderful rest of your day.